Welcome to another Pops Deck Tech with Dr. Magic. I'm sitting here with one of our local players, Curt Fuhrman. Curt, most of you know. Curt's been around for a while, great player. 5 top 8s in Star City Opens. Been to some PTQs. And Curt's going to talk about his modern Merfolk deck. People call it Fish. Merfolk, it's one of my favorite decks. First tournament I ever won was with Fish. Back in the day when Force of Will was standard. In fact, there was no standard. But so it's been a while. Good to see that Fish is still around and you're still rocking it. Curt, let's talk about the deck. Obviously, we seem to have a theme here of Merfolk. Talk about the choices that you made and what role the cards serve in the deck.
Well, there's really only a couple cards that you can choose. Basically, the premise of the deck is you want to disrupt them while beating them down with Merfolk. A couple things do that. There's Cursecatcher that counters instants or sorceries. It's typically your turn 1 play. There's Harbringer of the Tides that tempos them out. There's Silvergill Adept to help you churn through your deck. I personally have 2 Tidebinder Mages main board. There's a lot of red and green strategies that tends to shut down.
Yeah, Termaglyph doesn't untap. That seems like a good play.
Yeah, or they're Birds of Paradise, you know.
Slow down the mana, yeah.
Yep.
If you can't bolt the bird, keep intact. It works.
There's, and then comes in your series of lords, Lord of Atlantis, Master of the Pearl Trident, Merrow Reejerey. I really like Merrow. He allows you to accelerate your board state tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
If he resolves on turn 4, you can pretty much empty your entire hand.
Sure.
And put everything else out. Kyra's in there just as a hedge against decks with a lot of removal. Helps slow them down. Mm-hmm. Make sure your lords stay out on the board. It's very important. Mm-hmm. You don't ever want them to die. Master of the Waves is pretty much your finisher. He comes in and brings his elementals with.
Mm-hmm. So he brings lots of friends to the party. Interesting to see. We get all the lords, all +1/+1. Other Merfolk. Interesting to note while we're looking at this that Lords of Atlantis has actually been errated. It is a Merfolk. So while Merfolk the Lord doesn't give him his own bonus, he would get the Masters and the Reejereys, which is neat here. So it's Harbringer of the Tides. New card from Origins, just the last set. Seems to have made its way into this deck. What did you take out for that, and why did you make that choice?
Well, before, traditionally, the deck runs some counter spells.
Okay.
Main. I moved away from that. I only run one Vapor Snag. We'll get back to that. There was much more Vapor Snags and Spell Pierces in that slot before. It does have Flash, so you can interact with decks like Splinter Twin or Kiki Jiki, Resto Angel, or other things like that when you need to.
So in response to the untap, flash them in, bounce them back. Okay.
You can also use Vial to Vial in, which we'll I guess touch on later. It's a very, very important part of the deck. I don't foresee the deck not playing him anytime soon.
So it's a good addition from a new set. Those seem pretty self-explanatory. Let's talk about what you want to see in your opening hand. Curt, what's a keep? You look at your first 7. You know, what combination of these creatures do you want to see in your opening hand?
Well, like most decks, you need lands, and make sure that you have at least 2 sources that tap for blue.
Okay.
As you see, there are a lot of blue symbols. We do run other lands in our decks that do not produce blue, so
right.
It's very important to make sure you have at least 2 blue sources. There are exceptions to that rule. You typically want a 1-drop, Silvergill, and 2 or 3 lords.
Okay.
Would be your.
And with 12 of them, chances are you're going to have some of those. Well, great. Those are great blue creatures here, and lots of them. So that makes up most of the deck. But we do have some spells that are very, very important to making the deck work. So let's move on and let's talk about the non-creature aspect of the deck. Alright, Curt, now we're going to move on to the spells. It looks like about 9 spells. Heavy creatures, 9 spells. What makes the main deck here and why?
Well, Spreading Seas is in addition to the deck, and that all Merfolk decks typically run some form of spell that turns their lands into islands. Spreading Seas does a fantastic job at it because not only does it shut down certain colors they may play, but it makes the land an island as opposed to an island in addition to its other types.
Okay.
So decks like Tron you can shut down with it. If they're a mono red deck, they really need their red sources, and that helps. And it also cantrips you.
Sure.
And it adds devotion for master waves when that comes into play.
So all good things, and 4 copies of it. Cantrips, yeah. I mean, plus it takes advantage of all your Merfolk getting island walk. So you know,
yes,
unblockable.
That's very important.
Last time I checked, unblockable was a pretty good thing for creatures to have. So we've got Spreading Seas. Just one Vapor Snag.
Yeah. Like I said, the other creature, Harbringer of the Tides, that replaced some of the Vapor Snags, but I still like one in it because most people, I don't know, they don't play around it, and you can really tempo your opponent out, get through some extra damage. Say they play a Worm Coil against you, you can bounce it again against Splinter Twin. Other combo decks, even Infect is very good against because it can be as big as they want, and it's still going to return their hand. And the 1 damage that it does is actually important because I've killed a couple opponents with the Vapor Snag damage.
Who knew blue had direct damage? How do you know?
Yeah, it's not very common, that's for sure, but when you can get it, take advantage of it.
Sure, 1 doesn't hurt, especially if you're playing against somebody like John who hurts themselves a lot. Then we've got 4 Aether Vials.
Yes, Aether Vial is the best part of the deck. You can flash in creatures at their turn. It costs no mana. You can really accelerate your board. It might seem as though you fall behind on turn 1 and 2, but you make up that difference very, very fast. And with Harbringer of the Tides, they can declare attacks. They tap their creature. You activate Vial, bring them into play. Bounce back to turn. Also, a Splinter Twin activation, you can activate it in response to bounce.
Sure. Yep, leaves your mana open for some other things. And if you Vial in the Silvergill Adept, it negates the.
Yes, you don't have to reveal anything.
And you still get to draw the card.
You can Vial in Lords as a combat trick.
Sure, you combat
There's
tricks.
So many uses for it.
I personally love the card. I run it in a lot of decks myself. And that's one of those cards you don't run 1 of, you run 4 of. So that looks like the spells that we have: 4 Aether Vials, 4 Spreading Seas, and a Vapor Snag. Let's talk about the land base here real quick and see what supports the Merfolk. Alright, here we see the land base for Merfolk. Here we have 14 basic islands. Curt, get points because there's Zendikar Islands, but lose points because they're not the same artwork, and there's no Evolving Wilds.
No offense, I like my lands to come into play untapped. Yeah. We are an aggro deck, by the way.
That's true, that's true. So, plus more Evolving Wilds for me is fine. In addition to the islands, we have 3 Cavern of Souls. Obviously, I would think you'd name Merfolk on that one.
You can. I've named Spirit on it before for Kyra.
Okay. To
get that through the board. But normally it's Merfolk. It allows you to play your colored Merfolk spells and get through counter magic and other control decks.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be a drawback there for you. We've got an Oboro Palace in the Clouds. Seems to me you could just throw another island in there, but there's obviously a reason for that, Curt. Why are we running an Oboro?
Well, we run one of Oboro because it is legendary, and it just helps us play around Choke and Boil and other blue hosers like that, because those aren't the best cards for us to face.
Sure, and your curve is relatively low, so the fact of the matter is that you don't need a lot of land, so that and another one, if you're being held down by Choke, plus the Aether Vials, still leave you viable, leave you the ability to get your cards out. So.
Yes, I've beaten Choke a couple times, and it's hit many lands of mine, but not Oboro or Cavern or Mutavault, so
those things together help you. And then we do have the Mutavaults. I think this is one of those lands you had talked about, making sure you have 2 blue in your opening hand. It's one of the only card in your deck when it comes to creatures that would produce colorless, so do have to be careful of that in your opening hand. And then for 1, it becomes a 2/2 creature, all types until. So
yeah, it's important. Not only does it become a Merfolk, it's also an elemental for your Master Wave, so it gets that bonus as well, which a lot of players forget about, and you can actually just kill them on the spot because they didn't block it.
Oh, that's great. So if we have a Mutavault out with a couple of Lords, and the Master, Mutavault becomes a 2/2, gets the both Master bumps as a 4/4, gets the Elemental bump, which is what is it, +1/+1?
Yes.
And
no, +1/+0.
Plus
No,
one.
no, +1/+1. Yes.
I believe it is +1/+1
Yeah.
because they're 1/0s and become 2/1s. So now you're looking at a 5/5. It's a land. It costs you 1 to activate, so it's another.
It gives you something to do post board. Also survives wraths. If they wrath you, they're not going to kill your Mutavault unless they destroy it on your turn.
Sure. One of those things that kind of have to play around and gives you multi-use out of your lands, so they're not just sitting there being lands. So that's the mana base here. Let's move on and talk about the sideboard. Here we see the sideboard for Merfolk. Blue deck, and boy, the sideboard looks really blue. This is what I expect to see when I look at a blue deck, some control. Let's talk about the choices that you've made here and what matchups you want to bring these in against.
Okay, well, one of the worst matchups you can face is against Affinity. So I run 4 Hurkyl's Recalls. Some players just choose to lose the matchup, but I don't like doing that. I like to win every matchup I can. So I devote 4 slots to it.
Sure.
Basically, you need to play Hurkyl's Recall, or you pretty much will lose because they're faster than you. No, there's exceptions to the rule, and I have one without it, but it helps a lot. Relic of Progenitus is good against your Jund variants. It helps make your Tarmogoyf 0/1s. It cantrips. It's also good against a lot of combo decks, mainly Storm and Reanimator and other things to that effect. Spellskite is a multi-use card. I think it's one of the best sideboard cards in all of Modern.
Sure, see that in a lot of decks, sure.
It's great against Splinter Twin. It's great against Infect, Boggles. You can bring it against heavy control matchups to absorb their lightning bolts and paths and things like that.
So that's pretty. Those are pretty slotted pretty specifically into some control elements. We've got we found 1 Vapor Snag in the main, and we've got 3 more here.
Yeah, it rounds out the playset. Again, you bring those in against anything you want a little more interaction with. Anything you need to tempo out a little more. People playing like Zoo, Big Zoo, where you can really set them back by bouncing their 4-drop creature to their hand.
Gotcha. Yeah, we're in response to that pump, put it back. Vapor Snag is also really good against like a Tasigur, where they're going to spend all that time and energy to fill that graveyard early because they want to get them out early, and you're like, nope, you can sit in your hand for a few more turns. So
that really helps a lot to bring it back. You can also use it in a pinch to save your own guy if you're low on cards, which is often overlooked. Now you do still lose the 1 life, but I mean we're an aggro deck, so we don't really care about a life total that much.
Sure, you could bounce the Adept back to your hand,
right.
Play it, draw another card, be
Absolutely.
back on tempo. Very good tech there. Then we've got some counters. We have 2 Deprives and 2 Spell Pierces. Spell Pierces seem pretty obvious. I like Spell Pierces against those decks that are trying to run like an Aether Vial. Turn 1, I can try to stop that, especially if I'm on the draw. But Deprive is a little bit of a, you don't see that a lot. Why did you choose to run Deprive in this side?
Well, some lists run Remand, or they run Mana Leak, other things like that. I really wanted a hard counter, specifically for decks like Scape Shift and other things like that. You just need a counter that says no sometimes, and that's there to get them every time. You have to bounce a land, which isn't that big of a deal, really. But,
sure, because you don't need a ton of them.
Right. You can also bring it in against Burn, along with the Spell Pierces, because they run a very low curve, and you run a low curve as well. So it just helps edge in those kind of matchups. Combo any deck you would want to bring in a counter against.
So you're just on those aggressive decks, just just trying to kind of even the tempo match a little bit. If they're a little faster than you, just trying to get back on an even keel and outlast them. Your creatures eventually are bigger than theirs, at least in the long term with all your lords. So.
Yeah, no one ever plays around your counter spells because game 1 they never seen one.
True.
And then game 2 they still might not see one, but if it goes to game 3, you'll probably have played one by then, and you completely catch them by surprise. And then they'll be playing around it the rest of the game, and you won't have any more. So.
Right. Yep. All it takes one counter sometimes. Let's talk about matchups with this. What have you found? What's a good matchup for you? What's a bad matchup? And where do you see the deck as far as in the meta with where Modern is right now?
I feel like Scape Shift's about a 50-50 matchup. Affinity's probably 65-35 in their favor. Splinter Twin, I'd say, is about a 50. Most decks are a 50-50 matchup.
Mm-hmm.
Green decks and red decks, like I said, I have 2 Tidebinder Mages in there, and they really help those matchups. And I say they bring up the win percentage a solid 5% just by having those 2 guys in there, because they won't expect it, and they're never really a dead card in any matchup.
Sure.
It's basically fair against pretty much everything. Affinity, I think, it's your worst matchup. Other combo decks, you apply enough pressure to them that they can't afford to play around your counterspells when you have them. And other combo decks, you have the disruption that you need for them. Tron isn't the best matchup for you. If you don't hit one of their lands, they're gonna pretty much take over the game. It pretty much comes down to that. In fact, I found to be whoever's on a play wins kind of deal. So
we've battled it out a few
Yeah.
times like that. A timely Vapor Snag, I think, got me the last time we played. So, yeah, I mean, the deck is obviously solid. One of the things that I find interesting about the deck, and this is a perspective of someone who's played against it and not played it, is that it looks kind of one-dimensional from the aspect of we're an aggro deck, we're a blue aggro deck, but just all the little interactions that you have between your creatures, but also your ability to interact with my board at whatever level you want, especially after board. It looks like a solid deck. You enjoy playing it?
I do. I love to play it. I feel as though it's very well positioned right now, and I feel it's very underrated. Just because other players aren't playing it doesn't mean it's not good.
Sure.
You do see it top 8 at GP now and then again, and you wonder how many people are actually playing that deck to get the one person up there. It's probably 50% of the field is playing Splinter Twin or Jund or decks like that. You expect those to top 8. If those don't top 8, you wonder what happened.
Sure.
But no one's playing Merfolk, so I feel it's a good deck. I feel it's underrated. If 1% of the field can play Merfolk and top 8 at tournament, it must be a pretty good deck.
So you kind of come in, slither through the cracks a little bit, take some people by surprise, and
yeah, no one expects it. That's for sure. They think you're on a completely different deck.
Sure. See an island on turn 1, I'm thinking control, and here you
drop Aether Vial, and they're like, oh no.
Yeah. Here we go. The deck is sweet. Definitely tier 1 in the Midwest, and looks like something that will be a lot of fun to play. Curt, appreciate you joining us and showing us your deck and bringing us down and taking us through the cards. This has been Dr. Magic with another Pops Culture Deck Tech. I hope you'll join us in the future for more great decks.